Welcome to StackLeague Jobstreet Career Sessions, Smarter Approach in Advancing Your Career. Brought to you in partnership with Jobstreet Philippines. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Aliana Sison, an intern from Bulacan State University, and I'll be your host for this afternoon. So, this event would not be possible without the help of our partners. We have Jobstreet, Microsoft, Workbank, AWS, Caliber, Accenture, and of course, our media partner, Inquirer.net. We would also like to thank our community partners, Product PH, UX PH, our Philippines, Mozilla Philippines Community, Davao JS Philippine, Davao JS, Philippines.net Users Group, Ministry of Testing Philippines, GDG Philippines, PWA Pilipinas, React.js Philippines, PITE-SADA, Philippine Information Technology Organization, and Reskill PH. To give the opening remarks and to also talk about StackLeague, help me welcome the head of growth of StackLeague, Ms. Haifa Karina Baluyos.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us in this beautiful afternoon. It's a cloudy day out there, and hopefully you will learn a lot from this session. And a lot of you were expecting professionals and students who wants to learn more about job hunting and and definitely growing your careers. And we have a very special guest today, and we will introduce him to you shortly. But before that one, for those who are new at StackLeague, I will just quickly run through what StackLeague is all about. So here, StackLeague is the Philippines' first year-round programming tournament. So we just launched last March 16, and we are, at the end of the year, we are going to identify the top 10 best developers in the country. So how it works, just to highlight, all the participants here or the contestants in the league have a lot of benefits by just being part of the league. So mainly, of course, when you become one of the top 10, there is a cash prize pool. So right now, the cash prize pool is already at 250,000 and it continues to increase. And we also have media partners to recognize all of the best developers, not just the year-round efforts. We have an overall ranking, and we also have the weekly rankings. And also, there are a lot of tech job opportunities available for you. So we have here, we partner with Jobstreet a lot to provide that. Jobstreet provides a lot of opportunities, especially for IT. And you can find them more here. And also throughout the year, we have exclusive events. So all of you, all of the attendees of these sessions are required to have a StackLeague account, because we will be also promoting a lot of events, not just career-related events, but also tech sessions where you can learn further about different technologies. And how the ranking system at the league works. So like if you play games, usually you start at the lower level. So when we sign up, we have 0 points. And then we rank up by earning plenty of points. So we start at bronze. So that's the easy round. And then every time you solve a bronze level question, there is a corresponding points. And then when you level up, the silver level has more difficulty, but it gives you more points. And definitely the most difficult challenges are the gold ones. So they're more difficult, but they also provide exponential points. So there you go. That's how the ranking system works at StackLeague. And this is how. So if you're already a participant of StackLeague and if you already tried taking problems, this is how it looks like. You already have the problems there. There are test cases that you wanted to solve. And then once you're confident with your answers, with your code, you can already submit it and it will be evaluated, and then you get points in return. So there are different programming languages that we support. So we have Java, JavaScript, Python, PHP, and C#. And there you go. That's it. Now I'm turning it over to Yana. Yana?
Thank you so much for that opening remarks, Ms. Haifa. Now let me introduce to you our speaker. He is an experienced marketing professional with 12 years combined in the utilities, startups, transportation, and tech industries. Recently, he became the new candidate marketing lead of Jobstreet PH. Let us all welcome Mr. Rafael de la Cruz.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. So as mentioned, I am the candidate marketing lead here at Jobstreet, and we do want to discuss in line with the topic that we have right now is the how to build our career, especially during these times, these very uncertain times in the time of COVID, right? So I do have a deck, a presentation, which I can flash right now. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So the title of the presentation is Navigating the Workplace in the New Normal. So as you can see, this is really centered on the events that we have right now. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns that come with it, the way that we live and work, they're not going to be the same ever again. This would be how we can phrase it as the new normal. So the things that possibly your colleagues or your classmates or your parents are actually doing right now in the workplace, where they're staying more at home, doing teleconferencing, those are the things that are going to be the mainstay moving forward. So for those that are interested, we conducted a survey among job seekers. If you're very interested in checking the survey, please feel free to check this QR code. And the findings that we were able to get from that one would be that in the Philippines, more than half of the job seekers were affected by the COVID-19 crisis. It's been going on for a little bit more than 13, 14 months. I remember the day when the government actually declared that work has to be stopped and everybody had to stay at home. This was at March 17 of last year, and everything went to a standstill. Because of that, as the deck has mentioned, more than half of the job seekers were affected by this. So if we're going to look at the right-hand corner of the pie chart, we see that 32% of these are currently working. So they were affected by the pandemic. 17% were temporarily retrenched during the pandemic. 43% were temporarily not working due to the pandemic, although they were still employed. And then 8% were not working to begin with during the pandemic. So the two greatest chunks of this would be the 32%, those that were currently working, and the 43%, which were not working but still employed. And if we're going to talk about the industries that were gravely affected by the pandemic, it would be these. So employees in these industries were hit the hardest: tourism and travel, food and beverage, hospitality, catering, architecture, building and construction, and then finally education. So why were they hit the most? Well, uh, it comes to mind in the forefront kagad na tourism, because of the difficulty of moving people back and forth. Everything has to come to a standstill. The same thing with food and beverages. It's not that easy anymore to go out and eat in a restaurant and do those things. Architecture, building, and construction, they were hit the most because these types of work, you need to be physically present in order to do these activities. And of course, education was also hit. Uh, During the start of the pandemic, classes had to be halted. The manpower needed to sustain the facilities in these educational facilities were also halted. So Now, we discussed the industries that were really affected. Right now, ito naman yung mga industries that were not really affected by the pandemic. This is because of the burgeoning use of teleconferencing and the nature of work in itself now. So number one is IT, information technology. The second one is banking and financial services, medical and pharmaceutical industries. So these three industries were not hit. For the IT industry, it is because the industry itself has been pivoting for the longest time, in which being in the office is no longer as necessary as it used to be. You can do the same type of work that you're doing from, let's say, your table at home as if you were in the office itself. For banking and financial services, it would be the same thing. And the recent growth of banking services, like you have Paymaya, you have Gcash, all those things made it in such a way that the banking industry really wasn't as hard hit. You can still transact online, you can still transact with your other partners in such a way that doesn't necessitate you going out into the open and possibly getting infected. And finally, the medical and pharmaceutical industries. In fact, in this industry, uh, nagkulang pa tayo. We needed more people for this industry due to uh, the type of response that we needed in order to address the COVID pandemic in itself. So, as the headliner goes, the pandemic has affected businesses, work situation in very different ways. For organizations that have been operating for more than 10 years, uh, 61% of these companies had a very negative impact on the headcount. So, even if, let's say, you're a well established company, it necessitated that magtatanggalan ng tao, that they needed to retrench people just to survive. No? And for smaller organizations with less than 50 employees, 45% of these had a negative effect in terms of their salary and benefits. So not only did they need to cut out people, they also needed to cut down on the salary and on the benefits itself. Um, it's just of note that there is no significant difference in the use of employee leaves for both company sizes. Okay. And here's something of note: 98% of these organizations have implemented several changes during the pandemic. So, very few, if ever, in the types of companies that we have here in the Philippines, maintained a status quo. Everyone had to pivot. In the startup scene, they have a term, pivot or die. That's exactly what happened in the past year. If you weren't willing to pivot, your business would perish. And here are some of the changes that we saw being implemented in the various industries. 40% of these industries or companies postponed pushing for promotions. This is, of course, to maintain their fiscal flexibility, asking for staff to take unpaid leaves, reducing paid hours, and then finally redeploying staff into different roles or branches. Sometimes not just redeploying staff into different roles, but actually absorbing tasks of other people, most likely people that were entrenched or people that had to take these unpaid leaves or reduced hours. And from what we saw from these companies, the most obvious change is that we saw a shift in dynamics to working from home. 56% of people in the various industries were required to work from home. So on top of that, we saw that no bonuses or reduced bonuses at 24%, reduction in salary increases were stopped or suspended, Staff performance appraisals were also noticed, promotions suspended, a requirement to take an annual vacation leave and requirement to take unpaid leaves, in fact, were also noticed. We saw that in line with the previous slide that there was also a reduction in the number of paid hours total. But of course, the biggest change or pivot that we saw from these companies were that 56% required people to work from home. To reset and meet the customers' changing needs online, businesses are now changing strategies. As mentioned earlier, pivot or die. And the changes that they did internally would be the following. There was a need to invest in digital tools and technology to secure data. Hindi na pwede yung tipong they just go to the office, do a lot of paper pushing. Actually, the trend of paper pushing has been in the decline for the longest time, but we've seen an acceleration of this during this pandemic. We saw a shift towards majority of the budget go to online marketing. Since people aren't going out in the open, there's really no use to go physical marketing, but instead market through social media, through the internet and what have you. And there was an increase in openness for new ideas, and just so that we can do a business continuity. As mentioned, I can't overstate the fact that if the business is not able to pivot, that business would most certainly be affected gravely. Examples of this: restaurants that previously haven't seen on platforms like Grab, Food Panda, you'd see a big jump towards these platforms by such restaurants now. Retail stores are now migrating more into e-commerce, and you'd see, if you noticed, malls are actually feeling the brunt of this change now. Previously, prior to the pandemic, you can count on malls on having sustained foot traffic, but now a lot of businesses inside of the malls, brick and mortar stores now, are shifting more online. And companies like SM are seeing the pitch of this and have actually pushed for an online channel as well for their own businesses. And of course, we're not just talking about businesses, we're talking about you guys, no? Students, employees, colleagues, mentors. Tayo talagang maapektuhan ng mga changes brought about by the COVID pandemic. So we do need to adjust to these changes. And we see that employees working remotely need more support. Taking into consideration my scenario as a parent, it is quite a it's quite a feeling having to work from at the same time taking care of your kids. Previously, your lunch break solid yan. Let's say 1 hour yung lunch break mo. Your lunch break, you don't actually consider the fact that you have to cook your own lunches or dinners or breakfasts. At the same time, you have to take care of your kids, and you also have to do the dishes at the same time. So the stress level, of course, is there, and employees, because of that, need to be supported. And despite having kept their jobs under COVID-19, many of these currently working are no longer happy with their jobs. The pivot has been painful for a lot due to the example that I mentioned earlier. We're working more from home, and the expectation is that you should be able to get things done more in the setup. So the feeling as an employee, it's somewhat unnerving and is causing a lot of unhappiness. Although we would be grateful and thankful that the jobs that we have continue to employ us, it does have a big effect on the morale of the employee. So 48% of employees working from home are clocking in longer hours, but still taking in more house responsibilities. These are the same things that I have been mentioning earlier. No? And when you're working at home as well, sometimes hindi mo napapansin that you have to take a break. I've seen people and friends within the industry working for 12 hours straight without actually noticing that, and hirap nang tumayo from the table because meetings come rapidly in succession, one after the other. So 54% have stated that there needs to be a separate workspace. 48% have noticed that they are working longer hours. 43% uh, have mentioned that the times that you work have changed. On top of which, you are taking in more household responsibilities. 28% though have mentioned that they are working shorter hours, and 20% have mentioned that they have asked other household members to take on more responsibilities. But overall, 54% and 48% astonishingly have mentioned that they have been working way more than what is being asked. Now, aside from job security and finances, the largest chunk of employee concerns during the pandemic is directly related to leadership. More than ever, there is pressure to achieve targets, carry heavier workload, manage pressure from managers, among other issues. As you may know, businesses right now are in survival mode. So the mindset of these companies are strongly geared into pushing as much output in order for the organization to survive. So employee concerns, as mentioned earlier, 58%. I think this is mentioned in earlier slides. Mentioned concerns about personal and family finances. 53% concerns about job security. 47% missing face-to-face contact with colleagues and customers. 43% issues with technology. 38% poorer opportunities for career progressions and growth. 34% difficulties in achieving company targets, and 33% in regard to heavier workload. And of course, support for mental health wellness is at the forefront of things. I can't overstate the situation COVID has placed on top of not just employees, not just of business owners, but also of students and everyone else. No, being isolated and being far from your support systems, your friends, and relying mostly on video calls and social media can only do so much. Iba pa rin talaga when you're talking about face-to-face interaction. We are, after all, human beings. We do crave physical interaction with people. And this has been a very difficult time for everyone. Now, we'll talk about hiring during the time of pandemic. Digital recruitment is now the new normal. For those that are looking to get into the job market, the medium that we're looking at right now, hindi na uso yung, especially right now, yung kasanayan, let's say like my dad or my uncles, that you'd go to all these brick and mortar companies and submit a resume. No, that is so old school na. You have to go through digital recruitment platforms like where we are right now here in Jobstreet. This is actually the way to go now when it comes to being recruited and recruiting employees. Frustrations from job seekers on the recruitment process show that hirers are still struggling to adapt their processes in the new ways of work. 49% have mentioned that the process for recruitment has been taking longer. 48% have mentioned lower success rate, being invited to interviews. 47% less suitability when it comes to the jobs being advertised. And 34% in difficulties being interviewed remotely. So the two items that I'd want to focus on would be, of course, the recruitment process taking a bit longer than usual, and the difficulties being interviewed remotely. Um, just a little bit of a tidbit. Uh, a lot of companies tend to shy away in the practice of taking an interview, let's say via the phone, and it does seem a bit unprofessional, but it comes with the territory. Not everyone is supplied with a laptop. Sometimes in their previous jobs, they had a desktop and right now have to rely on the mobile phones. But those practices are a bit shunned upon, right? You'd also see a lot of cases where, like right now, you're doing a meeting, a conference call, and you'd see someone very formal, pero pagdating pala sa lower part of their bodies, naka-boxers and what have you. It's becoming commonplace na lang that you are limited by what is the scope limited by your camera, right? But those are the things that you tend to notice during these times of digital recruitment. And aside from recruitment, we're talking about a shift in the onboarding process from the traditional way of doing things to a virtual means of onboarding new employees. Now, before the pandemic, candidates were looking for the following. We noticed that there was a shift in priorities in terms of what they are looking for in a career. Pre-pandemic, candidates were looking for positions, titles, the company that they plan to work for, the location, requirements when it came to experiences, and the perks that come along with the job. But things have changed quite rapidly due to the impact of COVID. These are the things that we're looking for right now in a company. Candidates are looking for an HMO from day one. Takot magkasakit because of COVID. The company equipment would be provided. So we're talking about the cameras. We're thinking about maybe a dual screen, what have you, internet, Wi-Fi allowance instead of transportation allowance in case that the job necessitates you still going to work, an employee shuttle service that doesn't require you to go through public transportation, sleeping quarters or housing for more traditional or for businesses that require more of production or needs you to stay in the business for an extended period of time. Extended medical insurance coverages, so not just for you personally, but you also want to take a look at your family, your dependents, your parents, those things no, become part of the things that come uh, front and center for the candidates. Stable and secured companies. So we're looking at companies that won't suddenly flounder or are on the brink of bankruptcy because of COVID. You're looking for something that can stand the test of time or is a business that you are confident can stay afloat during the pandemic. You want to look for companies that can allow online interviews from start to finish. So from initial all the way to the final process. And the sign up is also online. Finally, we're looking for employees are looking for no longer suitability of their career or their background to the job, but looking towards jobs that have no experience required. As you may know, a lot of people have been affected by COVID and probably were taken out through retrenchment or have to find new careers themselves, and they are in the position that they can be picky when it comes to the job offerings, and they hope that these jobs don't require tough experiences, work-related experiences, right? So are we ready to support these changes? We're talking about both for business, for candidates, for students, and for the nation in itself. For job applications, you have to be a bit worried and a bit on guard. There are a lot of yes, there are a lot of websites out there that are offering job applications, but these websites can be unsafe, in which they may offer candidate leads or might offer job opportunities, but they compromise on quality. There was a situation a month back, medyo it was in the news about one job portal uh, that had a problem that they were hacked and that the customer candidate information, both of companies and of candidates, were made available, no? were thrown into the public. So personal information, yeah, and it's scary to have those details out in the open. So you have to be very careful in choosing the right platforms to do your job applications or selecting portals in which you want to post jobs in itself, right? And that's where actually Jobstreet comes in. How are we helping the Filipino workforce? We noticed that in the news, and the number is growing, over 27 million Filipinos are out looking for jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. We can't overstate the fact that a lot of people were hurt badly because of these. I've known people personally that have lost not just their jobs, but their careers and families because of this one. So it affected people on not just on a personal level, but on their family circle as well. So marami talaga naapektuhan dyan. And of those 27 million, 12 million of them, we have 12 million candidates that are here on JobStreet. And we believe that these 12 million people, we are able to make a difference in their lives and getting them started with their new careers, making sure that opportunities are there, readily available, as long as they stay in touch, as long as they keep track with what's being offered on the platform. So this is a COVID-19 job report. This was last August that detailed a lot of the findings that we have here. No? With that, I end my presentation on the impact of COVID on employees, on candidates, right?
Thank you for that presentation,
I hope
sir.
people were able to get something out of our presentation there.
Yes, po. Now we open the floor for Q&A. So we invite everyone, if you have questions, just type it and we'll be reading that for a few moments. So for the question number 1, what are your job searching tips for job seekers or fresh graduates who currently have no experience?
Actually, that's one of our key strengths here in Jobstreet. So let me just make sure I got the question. What are job tips that we can give to fresh graduates during these times of COVID in landing their career? Is that the question?
Yes po, especially yung sa mga wala pong experience na fresh grad.
Okay, for that one, the takeaways that I can give you is that we're big right now on uplearning. Just because we've graduated, even myself now, just because we've graduated, uh, doesn't mean that we have to stop learning. In fact, there's a term right now that we use called uplearning. Uplearning is the activity that you're learning new skills in relation to, let's say, something related to your career, something related to your field of study, you know. And these things, there are a lot of platforms out there that are offering free free modules, free seminars online, which you can do up learning. Top of which would be organizations like Future Learn. If you go to Future Learn, which is a partner of Jobstreet, after you've created your profile in Jobstreet, go to Future Learn. You'll be able to see a wealth of seminars and modules which you can learn from. And in certain cases, not just in Future Learn, you would have modules that can provide certifications that you were able to accomplish these modules and learn these modules. And not just I'm not just talking about the certifications, but the actual skill set would give you an edge in terms of what you put in the resume. Sometimes job uh, job posters, those that post jobs online or in various portals, tend to look beyond what you've accomplished in university, but what you've done to sustain that prior to landing your first job. So, if there's a big takeaway that I can give on that one, do up learning as soon as you can after graduating. Learn new skill sets. It may not have to be directly similar to let's say your current industry. I mentioned previously that a lot of industries right now were hurting because of the COVID pandemic. Let's say you're in the food and beverage industry. It might not be such a wise choice to take up modules on the food and beverage industry. Maybe I'd want to take up something more in line of IT. Then I would look for modules on big data analytics, even on the beginner level. If I'm able to do that, I'm quite sure a company would be more than willing to take a risk and hire someone that has a skill set that they've learned during the intermediate period between graduating and landing the said first job. I hope I was able to answer your question. And on top of that, uh, always make sure that in line with your JobStreet platform, your details are always present. It's always updated. You make sure that your details are complete. One of the key things that we usually see, a mistake that we see from new candidates is that in a rush to land a job, medyo hindi nila nilalagay yung tamang detalye in their details. Uh, a third takeaway that you need to do is, of course, in job platforms like JobStreet, that is our key strength actually, is the ability to filter out the various job offerings that are suited to what you are looking for. No? So exactly for uh, what you need. I would suggest focusing on two things. Number one that is closely related to your core skill sets. Or if, let's say, you're looking to diversify, you're able to attain a bit of up learning details in order to reinforce your job street profile or your resume, making yourself more hireable and making yourself more desirable in the eyes of recruiters.
Thank you for that answer. So, do you have any specific tips for job seekers in the IT industry?
IT industry. We have a separate study right now here in here in Jobstreet. It's a new study. Feel free to go and download that in our website. Uh, it's the Global Talent Survey. And what we have seen so far, especially in the IT industry, is the ability to not limit yourself uh, to jobs here locally. Due to the pivot to a more virtual workplace, you are now actually able to land jobs, not just here in the Philippines, but in fact, in top countries like Australia, United States, Canada, New Zealand, Singapore, right? And working from your own home. previously, a huge number of IT professionals, uh, these types of professionals, would tend to look for shifting, becoming OFWs and going to these countries. But there is no longer such a need due to this pandemic. And what it has shown is that you can enjoy the comforts of staying here in your country, not having to deal with the increased cost of living in other countries, but being paid the same amount as if you were working in the United States or Canada or New Zealand and Australia. No, so that's one big tip that I can say for this industry. And there has been mounting. There is has been growth in that area in the IT industry, where other countries are very interested in Filipino talents.
And thank you po. No? I think that would be the end of our discussion. Once again, thank you, Mr. Rafael de la Cruz, for that presentation and answering some of the questions. And
Okay,
that's
the
the end
pleasure
of
is mine.
our session. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we hope this session arm you with the knowledge on taking a smarter approach in advancing your career. See you all at the next Stock League session.
Thank you.